That's not me making that noise.
Really bad feedback happening.
Sorry?
There's some really bad.
Okay. Can I, look, we might make a start. As I've mentioned already, for those who have been online for a little while, a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Bron Burr, and I am the Knowledge Sharing Manager as part of our Schools Plus team. And it's really is my pleasure on behalf of the whole team to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Attendance Matters. Can I ask that if you aren't on already, that it may be helpful just to mute your sound, and that will help minimise any feedback that are coming through for everyone if it's at our end. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which each of us are joining today, and in particular, the Ngunnawal people where I am joining you. And to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. As I've mentioned previously, we had a terrific response to today's webinar, and with over around 100 registrations coming through. Now, we're always mindful that people's circumstances change, but I really would like to extend an incredibly warm welcome to each of you who have been able to join us. As I said, the positive response, I think, is a real testament to both the interest that people have and the importance and relevance of today's topic, as well as to the calibre of our speakers. So thank you very much. I would like to take just a moment for those of you who are less familiar with Schools Plus to just introduce us a little. Australian Schools Plus is a national not-for-profit set up a little over 7 years ago now, with the purpose of supporting schools with an ICSEA rating of below 1,000 to really, I guess, build their capacity to lead change and also in turn help close the education gap. And since our commencement, we're really proud to say, very, very proud to say, we've connected and worked with very generous donors to distribute over $26 million in over 1,000 schools across the country, particularly in disadvantaged communities. And I guess when we talk about the reach to our students, we're looking at around, we're a little bit over 300,000 students. Of course, none of that's possible, as I've already mentioned, without the generous support of our donors. So it is in that context that we really come to today's webinar, which is one of the ways in which we, I guess, look to support and to share the learnings from the projects that we are supporting in those schools across the country. Just one way of extending the reach, I guess, and also I hope, we hope to help each of you in the work that you are doing. Today's webinar is the third in a series focused on student mental health and wellbeing that we've been hosting throughout this first semester of 2021. And the theme Attendance Matter really grew from what we were observing in the projects that were coming through to us, with initiatives focusing very much on addressing issues around attendance at school and student engagement. I think we'd all agree, and we probably wouldn't be here if we didn't, that attendance matters. And that it can impact on student academic achievement, their development, and certainly their engagement in learning. Equally, there are many factors at play, and I'm sure each of you in the work that you do every day see those transpire, and whether they're individual, whether they're cultural, whether they're socioeconomic factors, or indeed, as we've seen over the last 12 months or so, environmental factors that can really impact on a student's attendance at school. So it's sort of in that context that today we will hear from two guests, Susan Marie Harding, who is the Principal Research and Evaluation Principal at the Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership, or AITSL, as many of us will know it, and Ali Wilson, who is the Family Engagement Officer involved in the Every Minute Matters program in the Goldfield clusters of schools in regional Victoria. I think together, Susan Marie will provide, I guess, insights into share some trends and really up-to-date research actually around issues relating to attendance, provide some insights on the impact and factors influencing non-attendance, and then Ali will actually highlight an approach that the cluster of schools that she's been working with have adopted, a community-wide approach that have adopted to address the issues of non-attendance within the community. Just a little bit of background. I'm sure each of you have had the opportunity to read both Susan and Ali's bios, but Susan brings, we're delighted to have her with us today. She brings a really strong background in education and assessment research, and I know together with her team at AITSL really focuses on many of the key policy issues linked to national education initiatives and directions, and helping to shape policy in so many areas. So Susan, thank you very much for making the time and sharing your expertise with us today. Ali also brings both expertise and experience in education and social work, and certainly both of those come to the fore in her current role as the liaison officer as part of the Goldfield School Cluster. I always get caught up over that, I'm sorry. Just a little bit of background about the project, and I'm not going to steal your thunder here, Ali, but that particular project is a part of a 3-year fair education program. It's one of the programs that Schools Plus manages on behalf of donors to support really transformational change, whether it be in an individual school or in a cluster of schools, as we see in the case of the project that Ali will talk to today. So I guess with those two presentations, a little bit of research for us and a little bit of sort of really practical, grounded experience and insights being drawn from one of our project areas. Susan Marie and Ali will probably talk for about 35 minutes together, and then we will have 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes or so for questions and ideas. And thank you, firstly, thank you to those people who did submit questions prior to the webinar. We will bring those out at that discussion point, but I really do strongly encourage you, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please pop them into the chat. And feel free to support one another as well in responding to those, because I do anticipate that across this group of 56 participants that many of you will bring your own experience and insights that might be helpful to one another. So please feel really free to do that. So I think with that introduction, and if everyone is comfortable and have no questions, and please, if you do, pop them through the chat and I can address those. I would really like to hand over to Susan and Ali to take us through the next half an hour or so. Susan and Ali, it really is a privilege to have both of you along today to learn with you and from you. Thank you in advance, and over to you, Susan.
Thank you. I just have to work out, you were on I somehow moved all the people, including myself, onto a different screen. So I had to find the unmute button. So hopefully everyone can see this attendance matters slide.
We can certainly see the slide, Susan, and we can certainly hear you.
Great. So to begin, I would like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm speaking from, which is the Wurundjeri man. And you can see here there's a picture that we like, which is a watercolour. And I would like to pay respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. And also I would like to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be among us today, who continue to contribute to work on improving student attendance across Australia. So as Bron explained in her brief introduction about today, student attendance is important for success and wellbeing and student engagement. So I'm going to go through some of the statistics of student attendance in Australia. And there's really two major statistics that we look at when we talk about attendance. One is the attendance rate. So in Australia, year 1 to 10 students attend on average 91% of available school days. That's the attendance rate. And there is a proportion of school students who attend school what we would call regularly, and regular school attendance is usually defined, and this is how ACARA defines it, as attending approximately at least 90% of school days. So in Australia, 73% of year 1 to 10 students attend at least 90% of available school days, which means that more than 1 in 4 students miss more than 10% of school days. So that's more than 1 day a fortnight and more than 20 days a year. I can see if I can open the chat as well. So if anyone has any questions as we go along, I can see the chat as well. Feel free to post them in there. So attendance isn't the same across the school years. So some of you might be from primary schools, some of you might be from secondary schools or different interest groups. So attendance rates are higher in primary schools, and then they drop. So you can see that, interestingly, sort of year 3, 4 students are the good ones. They're the ones that mainly go to school the most. But you can see the attendance rate at the top there, 92% for year 1s. And it's fairly stable for primary school students, and then drops for year 8, further in year 9, and then in year 10. And the attendance level, so that's the proportion of students that attend at least 90% of the days of school, that drops. So when we're getting to year 10, we now only have 64% of students in Australia that attend regularly. So some of this is fairly intuitive, but I guess there are some important details in the exact proportions. So attendance rates are lower in remote areas, and that's fairly obvious. But the other thing is there's sort of a interesting pattern where the more remote students get, the bigger difference between the primary school attendance and the high school attendance. So in major cities, you have the primary school in the dark green there at 93%, and then the high school students at 91%. And when I say high school, I know we're only talking years 7 to 10, but, you know, primary high school, it's easier. Then as you get sort of further out and out more remote, you see the difference in attendance rate gradually widening until when you're in very remote regions, there's only 74% attendance rate and 62% attendance rate for secondary students. And of course, we know that students in very remote areas have additional reasons why it's difficult to get to school. So there's, you know, if they miss the bus, it might be an hour or 3-hour drive. No one can take them, so they just can't go that day. Or if there's a flood, they can't physically get to school. There are other reasons why in very remote areas students might not go. Hay season, they need to work with their parents. And the older they get, the more likely it is that they'll have home duties. So there's a combination of factors that might be causing that difference between the primary and the secondary students in their attendance, especially as we get further away from metropolitan areas of the country. And I don't have the data for years 11 and 12. Australia is actually really good at recording attendance data. If you do a Google of other countries, I was able to find United Kingdom and like a particularly Canadian study, but actually Australia is probably, I would say, one of the best countries at actually regularly tracking attendance, which is probably very important that we do so. So no, I don't have the data for year 11 and 12. But very good. See, you can put a question, I will answer it, even if the answer is I don't know. So this data is from ACARA, and it's the 2019 attendance data. So this is a finding that most of you acknowledge and we are aware of. Attendance levels are lower for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. And this is further exacerbated in very remote areas. So effectively, it's a compounding type effect. So you can see at the top the attendance level there for students in major cities. You can see it's dropping for year 8, 9 and 10. And then the next green line, which is further down, shows that non-Indigenous students in very remote areas have a lower attendance rate than the non-Indigenous students in major cities. But looking at the lighter green line, you can see that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students do have lower attendance levels, even if they're in metropolitan areas. And then that's further exacerbated in very remote regions, where by the time you're looking at year 10 students who are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, on average, this is on average, not all of them, but you have 11% of the students are going to school regularly and 89% are not going to school regularly. So you can see that's a huge difference there between both the Indigenous status of the student, but also the region where they're going to school. Now, this is probably not good news, but in the last 5 years, what we are starting to see now is a decline in student attendance levels. So 2015 was really where Australia and ACARA particularly got on board with measuring attendance and tracking attendance. And at that point, you can see where the attendance levels were. So we've plotted out here the non-Indigenous primary school students. That's the top line there. They go to school more frequently. And then the year 7 to 10 non-Indigenous students, the second line down, the high school students. And then we move to primary school Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students and high school Aboriginal or Torres Strait Island students down the bottom. So there's been a decrease for all of these groups of students except for primary school Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island students. So there's a glimmer of hope there. The primary school Aboriginal students, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Island students, they're grouped together by ACARA. We haven't seen a drop of attendance in that group, which is really good because as most of you would know, there has been a push for attendance and the whole Close the Gap. Part of the idea was to make sure we had regular attendance for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. But at the top here with the the two non-Indigenous school graphs there. So you have the primary school students dropping 4%, and then the high school students have dropped 6%. And then high school Indigenous students have also dropped 5% from 2015 to 2019. So we wanted to have a look at what year level might be affected the most. So that's just the average attendance. So what we thought what we would do is have a look at attendance levels just for each of the years of schooling. Obviously not 11 and 12 and not foundation year either. But you can see that there we have at the top our superstar year 3 and year 4s going to school most of the time. Well, 80% of them are going to school regularly around about, but that has dropped. So it's dropped from 81% to 78. So it's dropped 3 percentage points in the last 5 years. And you can see that then you have this big gap here where the this solidy black line with the triangles there, hopefully you're following these graphs, that's the year 8 students. They're not going to school as much. And also let's have a shout out to the year 7s who are still bright and sparkly and heading off to high school. They seem to be okay. Just the year 8s turn a little bit not so great. And then that the year 8 attendance rates have, attendance level, the proportion of regular school, they have dropped. So 5, 6, 7%. And similarly, you know, you have a 6% decline for year 9s and what's that, 5% decline for year 10s. So it's it has been quite a drastic drop actually. And then it's a little bit of a worrying trend. I just put this graph in because I've messed with the y-axis so that we can have a look, but I didn't want to be all doom and gloom. So this white space under those lines there, that's all students that are actually going to school, so that, you know, you still have those 64% of students that have regular attendance, but the levels have still declined. So then I was sort of thinking, does it matter? Like, what is that? Well, there's about 4 million school students in Australia. So a decline of 3% is 120,000 students, and a decline of 5% is 200,000 students. So that means, you know, if we're looking at a 5% drop, that's 200,000 students that were attending regularly in 2015. And then by 2019, they're not attending regularly anymore. So I think there is a considerable drop, and that's enough students that we need to do something about it. So it's time for me to take a breath and step away from looking at data and statistics and start to talk about what the impacts are of non-attendance. So we know that from research, and this is some research that a lady, Hancock and others, did in 2013 in Western Australia. It was a huge study. It had something like, I think I've made a note of this, 2.4 million records for over 415,000 individual students. So it was a massive study. It included students that enrolled from years 1 to 10, and it tracked them over years, and it looked at looked at all sorts of things. It looked at their impact. It looked at their caregivers upon enrolment, their attendance records, their NAPLAN results. It looked at their SES of the family, the geographical area, and it controlled for all of those factors that could be impacting on results. And what the study found was that achievement declines are associated with any level of absence. So it's almost sort of, imagine it's sort of like a, I don't know. It's like when you're pregnant and they say there's no safe level of drinking. Like no one can establish an actual point where if you miss X number of days of school, then that's okay. It won't affect your learning. What they found is that it all affects your learning, and really we just need students to go to school. The other thing that she found, which was quite interesting, was that unauthorised absences are typically associated with larger declines in student achievement. And this is possibly due to, it's the difference almost between wagging school and having a parental approved reason not to go to school. And if students are choosing not to go to school, those unauthorised absences actually have a more devastating effect on student achievement. And as absences accrue over several years, the effect on a student's academic achievement is cumulative. So we know that when students stop going to school, it effectively gets worse and worse, and you start to see their achievement drop. And the effect of non-attendance on achievement are greater for students who are already disadvantaged. So the students who are already testing sort of lower on achievement measures such as NAPLAN, those are the students that actually really don't want missing school. I'll find the name of the study. I don't have it written down. I will look that up while Ali's talking later, Nikki, and I'll drop the name of the study into the chat. Do I know why there is such a drop in attendance levels? No, we don't actually. We just know that there is one. I think one of the biggest problems is this is a pre-COVID drop. So this is the 2019 data. It's already showing a drop. So this is not even considering what's happened recently. Anyway, I'll push on. So there's lots of factors that affect attendance. And this is almost so obvious, I don't even want to bore you with the details, but obviously it's got to do with the individual. So the self-esteem, the lack of motivation, feeling unsafe at school, bullying, violence, any different reason, racism, any reason on the individual student why they might not want to attend school. That's one set of reasons. Familial, so parental attitude to school, that's important at both the primary and the secondary. In the primary case, they're dependent on the parents to get them to school a lot of the time. Not all students can walk. So, you know, if mum or dad or whoever's looking at auntie or uncle can't take them, then the children can get a bit stuck. And then in the later years, the attitude of the parents kind of wears off on the students as well. Like if the parents don't think school's important, that tends to float down to the next generation. And then we have the school-related factors. So essentially the first two, there's limited, what you were, as school systems and teachers and school leaders have to try to work on it. But the school-related factors are the ones that are easier to change. So poor relationship with teachers, lack of belonging to the school. So that's where the school can increase inclusivity, etc. You have economic, so socioeconomic disadvantage. Maybe we don't have a car, maybe we don't have the right shoes, and therefore the student, some of these actually interrelate quite closely to each other as well. And sociocultural factors, so like perceived relevance of the curriculum, perceived relevance of school, cultural differences with the students. Yeah, so it's absenteeism is quite complex. And notice I'm not listing like sickness, because I think what we really need to talk about is attendance not related to sickness, like attendance related to these types of factors. Because looking at the attendance rates and the attendance levels, we're not talking about these students are sick. These are 1 in 4 students don't have chronic health problems that cause them not to be able to go to school regularly. It's more deeper than that. So unfortunately, I'm spending most of the time explaining the doom and gloom. here are some ways, and Ali probably has far more to say about this than I do, and hopefully some of you have ideas as well that we can talk about later. But from the research, the ways to address non-attendance include setting positive attendance habits early in life. This is really important because the chronic absenteeism in early years and early as preschool and year 1 predict patterns of ongoing attendance. So and encourage parents to do so, because obviously at those early years, it is the parents taking the students to school rather than the students refusing to go, more so when you're looking at sort of 5-6-year-olds. So it's really important that they're all encouraged to get to school, and that's the importance of it is promoted. And then creating a welcoming, safe school environment for students by involving families and communities is probably the single best way to address non-attendance, which of course isn't a single way, but a whole or holistic approach. And then the third way to address non-attendance is to include detailed collection information about individual absences to enable the school to identify at-risk students so that they can intervene early. So over time, it's obvious which students are not attending as regularly, but it's to really get it early, like in those really early years. Because it just sort of exacerbates. They might, even though attendance rates and levels look fine in year 1, it's those few students who aren't attending as much in year 1 often then go on not to attend in year 10. So those types of data collection processes are really important. So I think that one other thing to talk about is the effect of COVID on school attendance. At this point, it's purely speculative. Student attendance in 2020 was seriously affected by the COVID pandemic, especially in Victoria. But because of the different arrangements for schooling across the country that were put in place, ACAR is not going to publish student attendance data for 2020. And consequences for prolonged online learning really haven't yet been established. So, yeah, I've pretty much finished. There is a conclusion, but I feel like we've already covered it, and I'd love to move on to Ali to hear what she has been doing with her school cluster. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm trying to press the buttons and all of that.
Thank you,
Ali.
as you're pressing the buttons. Really appreciated, the level of detail and insights there that you shared. Look, I'd welcome people to share any sort of suggestions or ideas, particularly around sort of, interventions or initiatives that you've implemented at your schools that might speak to some of the issues that Susan highlighted. But sorry, Ali, I've done exactly what I said I wouldn't do.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Susan, because that data was a really good backdrop to what I'm sort of going to talk about. I'm just going to share with you my PowerPoint. And as I was saying to these guys before, technology is not my skill set, so I feel a little bit on edge about it. Makes me realize how people feel on edge about sometimes going to school when they don't feel confident about going. Here we go. Sorry, bear with me while I get this up. Okay, can you see that? Yes, we're able to see that.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So Bron's introduction of me at the start. So my name's Ali Wilson, or Alison Wilson. I'm the current family liaison officer or family engagement officer for the Central Goldfields Shire. So Bron talked about my background in teaching in education, and I'm a social worker, but I think that my biggest biggest skill set I bring to the role is that I'm actually a parent as well. And not only am I a parent, I'm telling you this with intention, I'm the parent of a disengaged teenager. So I have a son in year 9. I hope he's not listening. And he's disengaged in school. So I'm a parent who's very proactive, very informed about getting him to school, and I have a lot of trouble. So it really highlights to me how difficult it can be when there's all these other barriers that Susan outlined. So I'm going to talk to you about the Every Minute Matters initiative, which the Central Goldfields Shire. So the Central Goldfields Shire is around there's 6 schools around Maryborough in Central Victoria. And collectively, they got together when they had a look at their data and realised that the data for school attendance was lower than the rest of the state. So 2019 data, obviously we didn't have it last year, shows, this is the data that shows that children that were absent for more than 20 days. So Susan talked about the 20 days being 1 day a fortnight. So there's quite a lot of students who are missing 20 plus days. So from each of the schools, when you break it down into percentages, you've got, anywhere from 41% of students, 21% being sort of the best performing school in our region for attendance. So those figures are quite confronting. And I thought that Susan's data was quite confronting in a lot of the things she presented. And you do end up sort of throwing your hands in the air and saying, well, how can I fix this? What can I do? And so this Every Minute Matters initiative it's just a small snippet at the moment of trying to progress towards increasing attendance. If I had a magic wand and I could wave it, as we would all improve this situation. But this is something that we thought we could do proactively. And I thought it was great that the principals of these schools all work together. A collaborative approach is usually more effective when people work together. So data's only data. We can't really find out any information about data. The data just tells us what it is. So it identifies that the students in the region do have a lower attendance rate compared to the rest of the state. So Susan's data showed that remote areas have lower data than those close to the cities, which, being a couple of hours away from the city, being more remote, there are barriers, things like transport, all that sort of thing, in order to get to school, add to the data, add to the absenteeism issue. And so this sort of improvement cycle, you can see down the bottom, it's probably a bit small, but you can see that together 29.5% of students were absent from school 20 days or more. So that's what the data is showing. And then from that data, we have to look at prioritising and setting goals. So where to from there? Then what happens? And then sort of developing a plan. So the aim here is that we want to improve attendance pretty much, which ultimately leads to better not only school skills in numeracy literacy, but life outcomes for students. So the goal is to reduce the numbers of students who are missing more than 20 days of school a year. And the goal that I really love is to build an aspirational culture. So rather than looking, I think, particularly as an education system in the past and today, often we look at people's deficits, what they're doing wrong, rather than what they're doing right. So if we can build a culture of encouragement and really helping to get behind all these people who are having difficulties, rather than seeing it as this particular group of students or families' problems, but seeing it as a community issue that we can work on together, then that's going to hopefully help. So we're obviously quite in the infancy stages of this project, and these sort of things take time, but building that aspirational culture and getting the message out there that every minute matters is really important. So this was a networked Shire wide response, so that all the schools in in the cluster have got the same, the same response to absenteeism. And one of those responses, we're looking at, we're in the process of developing policies and things like that, but it's looking at common messaging across the schools. So what do we want the message to students to be? So we're looking at the message for students to be that, so not only does school matter, but they matter. So if you say to kids, well, school matters, well, for some kids, it doesn't matter at all. How can we make school matter? So in order to make school matter, we need to have the students matter, feel that they matter. And that's all about relationship building. So our common messaging that school matters, that school is a safe place to be, and that they have a voice, that they do have a voice. And then we also want the messaging to the parents to be similar across the schools as well, in terms of, that children will be safe at school, same messaging for the parents, that it's a protective place for their children, that children will thrive, or more likely to thrive the more time they spend at school, and that they will gain more opportunities ultimately in life with that. So the students, the parents, and then the last group that we want some messaging to are the teachers. So teachers are often probably, I don't like to use the word difficult, but the cohort to work with, because I'm a teacher, most of us teachers, we sometimes get a little bit stuck in what we do, and we can end up rolling out the same stuff, not knowingly, but it's about being about really reflective practice and thinking, okay, what am I doing? Are my students engaged in the class? So I'm talking here now. Are you all engaged in what I'm saying? Have you all, how many of you have just muted your screen and gone off and made dinner? So we expect our students to be engaged in all our lessons, but are we doing the same thing? So I think sometimes we need to peel it back and just go, you know what, these students are just like us. They're just humans like us. And how can I make it more engaging? That's the $1 million question. But I think increasing teacher capacity through education and training for staff and a lot of staff support is really important, because as a teacher, there's some students who you would quite happily have absent for the day. Some students make teaching really, really quite challenging. So it's about how can schools support those staff around that. So as I say, we're quite in the infancy. We haven't sort of done a lot of that yet, but we have been working on educating staff, building staff capacity. So just a little bit more background with the Every Minute Matters. So in 2019, this was when the Goldfields principals got together and were successful in obtaining the funding through Schools Plus, the Smart Giving, and that funding was to support this Every Minute Matters initiative. And obviously last year it had to be put on hold. Can't have Every Minute Matters where there was no minutes when we were at school. So it has been really tricky with COVID, because here we are talking about you need to come to school every minute that you can. However, on the other hand, you've got, you're getting messaging that if you've got a sore throat, if you've got, if you're feeling the slightest bit unwell, you stay home. And so, you do have to make sure that your health's okay to go to school, but we're trying to have children not miss out on school, which is quite challenging. And the Every Minute Matters is also about not just attending every day, but looking at, helping parents to become aware, families, community to become aware that even things like turning up late to school, if you're turning up late 15 minutes every day, over the cumulative effect of that absence over a year is quite huge. So you might be coming to school, but we're looking at every minute matters, and encouraging appointments as much as you can. It's not always possible, but trying to have families aware that making appointments outside of school time and all that sort of thing. But again, there are many barriers attached to that, like some of those ones Susan was discussing earlier. So we had a community launch of this Every Minute Matters that was held at the end of last term in Maryborough. So we had student representatives from each school, and we were limited with numbers due to COVID, but we pretty much had the principals, the school leaders. We had some, you know, like the mayor, a couple of people in the community, prominent people in the community. We had the local newspaper come and cover this, and it was just about awareness raising, pretty much, about why every minute matters. And the little logo we've got here, can you see my mouse or not? I don't know. Anyway, I'm pointing to it. The Every Minute Matters logo. So we're using that on, like weekly or fortnightly in the school newsletters, there'll be a little piece about school attendance, and that little logo will go there. So it's like any logo. It takes time to sort of sit in your head. Like I think of a logo like Just Do It from Nike with the tick. So I know that logo. I know what that tick means. It means just do it, because that has been, you know, it's just been embedded in my brain. So it's hope that this Every Minute Matters will be embedded in the brains of the people in the community. So yeah, Every Minute Matters focuses on, it's bringing awareness to the importance of school attendance with children wearing wristbands. So you can see all these students, I've got one on here. So all the students are given this, at the start of this term, they were all given a light green glow in the dark wristband. And by wearing the wristband, they were making a commitment to attend as much as they could. And not only to attend as much as they could, but I worked with students about the fact that they're not just students, they're also teachers, and they can educate people. So they can educate their parents, they can educate the person that works at the local shop about what this wristband means, and that it shows that they're why it's important to go to school, and that they're committed to doing that. So the wristband, it's a little bit of a you know, it's just a little bit of an incentive program, but they wear this light green band, as I say, to show their commitment. And then at the end of the term, those students who have achieved higher than 95% attendance for the term, so that's only like not missing more than a couple of days off, they'll get a different colour wristband, dark green wristband, and students who have attended 100% will receive a gold wristband. And you know, so it's trying to build an aspirational culture where you aspire to have that gold wristband. And not only that, you know, by having little snippets in the paper. So there was another article in the paper this week, just again, having kids wear their wristbands, that hopefully, you know, we can bring businesses and things like that on board, so that if they see a child wearing their wristband, they might get a deal in their shop or whatever it is. So it's a community, attendance is pretty much the community's top priority, because those attendance rates, I can't remember what the actual number was, Susan. I think it was something like 5% drops. Was it 200,000 students? So disengaged from school. So think of the flow-on social effects of that, and it is a real community issue. So looking at other practical approaches to addressing attendance issues. So this wristband thing's, it's more just a little bit of a sort of a fun awareness raising thing. Building teacher capacity, as I spoke about before, also building parent capacity. And that's one that we have to be very careful with, because as educators in an education system, we may think that we know what parents need, but parents are actually the biggest experts in their own children. So, you know, like, it's really important that parents feel listened to. So it's not about just, you know, school response, yes, I hear you, but it's actually really having them be part of this consultation about what we're going to do to help address these issues. Now, there's going to be parents that will not engage, and that's, you know, that's really hard. And as I said earlier, if I had a magic wand, I'd fix that, but I don't, and nobody does. But all we can do, so someone asked a question earlier on the chat about SMS. Sorry, I haven't got the chat there with me, but it so it might be something like teachers each day, so children that are have high absenteeism rates, it might be that those students that are missing, you know, X amount of days, they send the text message to those parents weekly, just letting them know something fabulous that their child's doing. I know that if I got a message saying, gee, it was great having Isaac in the class today. He can be really funny in class sometimes, and I love having him there. That would make me go, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. As opposed to he hasn't been coming and he's falling behind in his you know, classes, and then you think, oh my God, I'm a failure. So it's trying to build aspiration rather than pull it down. And establishing relationships with families and communities to work in partnership is really important. So Susan also spoke about the importance of the early years. So working with organisations like maternal child health, kindergartens, you know, libraries, all those to try and come together to make this a combined approach to improving student attendance. And yeah, and that's the sort of thing that takes time, but that's the aim. And also I've just put on the bottom working on lessening the power imbalance, and I've put that in little power imbalance because as teachers, as principals, as social workers, as anybody in a position of power, you don't realize sometimes that you have that power. So if you're bringing a parent, particularly if you're bringing them into your space to have a chat about their child, you're kind of the one in that higher power level. So we want to bring that power level down. So like I was saying, let's work on making the parents the expert of the child, helping them. Where would they like to meet? You know, do they feel there's an issue? Like, is there even an issue? So before we come in and say, all right, you need to come in and address this, you know. Yeah, so it's all that sort of thing.
Ali, thank you.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think you are getting close to the end there.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, look, can I just say, firstly, thank you to both Susan and Ali for sharing their presentations today. I think the data that you shared, Susan, was as Ali's word, I think, a little bit confronting, and certainly enlightening. And I think some of the themes that you illuminated there, Ali, around sort of collaboration, you know, the great example that we see there in the Goldfields cluster of schools working together. But as you spoke, clearly it was talking about community partnerships and in the whole of community approach and focus. I think also one of the other key messages that I heard coming through was that student-centred focus there, that it's there, and the importance of the role of the family and again the family and community engagement in this process. So thank you both for sharing so genuinely and generously and authentically, I think, because I think you both brought your own personal experiences to the presentation. Look, there were a couple of questions also that came through from registrations, and I just wanted to sort of share some of those. And I can see too that people have been sharing. Nikki, thank you very much for sharing your example there of the work that you've been doing again through the support of Schools Plus in a similar sort of program, I think, to what Ali was sharing. So thank you for sharing that and continuing that great work. But look, a couple of questions, and in fact, maybe if I can just two, and maybe first I might go to Susan Marie and give Ali a break, given she's just come off of that. But I'll read the question, and it came through from Kat Elliott from Hampton Park, and I'm not sure if Kat's online today, but she asked the question: best practice approaches for working with Aboriginal families. Traditional white systemic approaches at times devalue Aboriginal community connection. How can we I guess support those connections with families from school and also build those trusting relationships with professionals as well. So are you able to sort of share any reflections there, Susan? And again, I encourage anyone to share on the chat any reflections they may have there as well.
I think so. Ali's explanation of forming relationships with the students is really important. It is interesting that often it's one or two teachers that actually go the extra mile for Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander students that make a big difference to those students, and they can cause them to be more enthusiastic about going to school because someone cares more for them. But I think the attendance, we have to realise with school attendance, a lot of the time it's a symptom. It's not actually the it's a symptom of the problem. So you have to fix whatever the problem is. So it might be lack of cultural responsiveness within the school, or the student doesn't feel welcome or safe. So it's those relationships that have to be built on first before you can't really fix attendance without going a bit deeper. So those connections with the student, and I think that there's not one answer, there's not one way to do it. So the best way would be to have those meetings with the student and to ask, and then you allow the student voice to inform what the barriers are, and then you can go about creating a way to change it
forward.
Yeah.
Thanks, Susan, for those reflections. Ali, did you want to add anything to that? I guess.
Yeah, I also think it's really important to make contact with your regional CESO, the Koori Education Support Officer. They have really good insight into. They're really a really good connector between the school and the child and the family.
Yeah. Thanks, Ali. That's great, and I expect that for many of us online, there are those roles within our own communities that we can connect with. Ali, just perhaps if I can throw to you a separate question. Again, this came from Bronwyn Thorogood, and I think she might be online. I did see Avon, maybe not the same one, but says we have students who have numerous days off school. We struggle to get parents in for a meeting. Can anyone share any collaborative ideas to get a positive outcome for the student in that sort of context? So Ali, sort of any thoughts? And again, if anyone online would like to share something they've done in that area, please do so, or pop your hand up.
Yeah, so for me, I think that's quite an intimidating thing, to be called into a meeting at a school. And so it might be looking at perhaps having somebody other than someone from the school approach, so someone that person already has a relationship with, helping to deliver that information, having the parent decide where the meeting's going to be, whether they want to have it at the local park or whatever is more comfortable for them. So I think it's about working with the parent. And again, there's going to be some parents that are just simply really, really hard to get to. But I think a lot of people really respond well. I've found most people respond well to being credited with something. If you give people credit for something, I look at people, sorry, I hope I'm not waffling on, but if you ever get a chance to have a look at Harry Burns from Scotland, he did a lot of work with the Scottish community when it was quite broken down, and he has a really amazing quote that I just love, and I take it with me everywhere. It's talking about let's not look at people in judgment. So people that have all these extensive barriers, let's not look in judgment, but let's actually look at these people in awe of everything that they're carrying around and the things they have to deal with. So I like to look at people in awe, because I think, some of these people have such an amazing amount of intersecting factors going on. And if you can credit people on the amazing job they're doing, trying to stay afloat, it's amazing how people will open up.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you for sharing that. Might take that one. Thoughtful. And I just see Ange Higgs has just responded. Everyone carries a backpack, which is also an interesting analogy there. Look, folks, I'm mindful of our time, and we're very close to 5 o'clock, and I realise that others have things to, other lives to get along with. Can I draw today's conversation into conclusion? I can see comments and questions coming through. I get the feeling that we need a little bit more time on this topic. So if for those people who are online, if it's something that you'd like to come back together again and share a little bit more deeply in a particular area, we really would love to hear from you. Please include it in the chat or contact Schools Plus, and we would be happy to pick that up again, because I can see that there are lots of things to share across this particular community. I think there is a question there too, Susan, and it comes from Graham Harding in the chat to do with the data, and you might want to have a quick look there and just see if you can answer it for him as I wrap up. But as I say, I would like to draw us to a close so that you can get away today. Can I, on behalf of us all, again thank Ali and Susan for their generosity in sharing their experiences today and their expertise. It certainly has opened up a lot of thinking and sharing there that we can see. You've certainly, I think, placed a real spotlight on attendance as an issue, and as I said it right at the introduction of the webinar today, it's certainly something at Schools Plus that we see as a really important area of focus for many of the projects that we're supporting. And I think, again, if I can, it just reflects back to the importance of family and community engagement, of partnering with communities and having the child at the centre of everything that we do. And I know for those of us who are working in this field that are online today, you wouldn't be online if it wasn't a priority for you. So thank you for what you're doing in this area. Can I also just make a call out to my colleague Honor Bethlehem, who works behind the scenes to help us come together in this way regularly on. Thank you for your support as always, and making it happen in that way. And again, thank you to each of you for coming along this afternoon and for what you do. We will send a link out to the recording of today's webinar so that you can share this with your colleagues and with others. And certainly I know there was a request, Susan, for your reference that you referred to as well, and we'll be happy to share that with you. So I guess on that note, as part of that communication too, there will be a tiny little request for some feedback. 2 questions. We'd be really grateful if you could take a few moments to provide that response to us. We're obviously keen to keep meeting your needs, because if we're not, it's not good use of your time. So really would love to hear from you in that sense. So on that note, thank you again for your time, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.